Welcome back to KTN Prime here on KTN News. Now, Parliament has been back this week after a long 2-month recess, Christmas recess, to a very packed entry. Analysts saying this is a very key session of the 12th Parliament. There have been some things in that entry, pending government bills that will of course be needed, especially as President Uhuru Kenyatta tries to get his Big Four agenda going in the next 3 years. Of course, he will be wanting to leave a legacy. Also, the budget-making process, the supplementary budget, those are some of the things, the food security bill, those are some of the things that both houses of Parliament will be looking at. The Parliament will also be keen to balance things out as talk of constitutional reforms continues to grip Kenyans across the country. Is this talk, is it time for that talk, or is it too early? Those are some of the questions that pundits have been asking. And joining us in studio tonight to have a chat with us and bring perspective into some of these issues is the Speaker of the Kenyan Senate, Ken Lusaka. Thank you, Bwana Speaker, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Now, this could be a very defining session of this 12th Parliament, with Kenyans starting to embrace this talk of constitutional reforms, plus a lot of work to do, especially for the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. What should Kenyans expect from your Senate in this third session?
In the third session, we are going to, we came back on Tuesday, and what we have prioritized first and foremost are bills, national government bills that came from the National Assembly. Some of the bills that the Senate is looking at are Physical Planning Bill, Land Value Index Laws Amendment Bill, Kenya Roads Bill, Energy Bill, Petroleum Bill, Corporate Amendment Bill, Public-Private Partnership Bills. So these are the bills that are government bills, and they came to the Senate towards the end of our last session, and we have given them priority. Those who follow the Senate proceedings must have noticed that today they were at second reading before the Committee of the Whole, which was now looking at amendments that we are making before we return them to the National Assembly. Then they proceed to for the presidential assent. This happens because if there is any bill that affects county governments, counties, then they must come to the Senate for concurrence. So these have been dealt with, and these are the ones that we have given priority. After that, we're also going to look at our own motions, our own petitions, statements, and the normal work that the Senate does.
During a recent meeting in Mombasa of leaders in both houses of Parliament, the President declared what he called the slow pace of some of these bills. Why the slow pace?
Yeah, you know, the problem is sometimes the voting in the Senate is completely different from the voting in the National Assembly. The Senate would also want to look at some of these bills in depth so that they can be able to make the necessary amendments. And when they come to the floor of the House, for it to go through, you need 24 counties voting for the bill. Otherwise, if we don't get 24 counties voting on the bills, then they are defeated on the floor of the House. That has very serious implications. So we must be very sure that the amendments that have been brought on the floor of the House, the amendments have been made maybe at the committee level. When it comes to the floor of the House, the bills go through. So that was partly what contributed to the delay, but I'm happy to report that this has already been addressed, and I'm sure by next week, all the bills, the government bills, will be through, and they will be able to be transmitted to the National Assembly and to the President for assent.
Let's talk about something that is likely to be a very big part of this session of the 12th Parliament, and that is the calls or this clamor to change Kenya's supreme law. What are your initial thoughts on the calls for a referendum?
Of course, we have a very alive, the Constitution is a live document, and it will be up to the Kenyans themselves. I think there's the bridging, we have a committee, Building Bridges Initiative Committee, that's going around collecting views from Kenyans. And if Kenyans feel that they want to change the Constitution or to look at the Constitution afresh after 7 years or so, it will be up to the Kenyans to look at that. But I think it's a debate, that is a narrative that is ongoing, and we must begin to look at the possibilities of having that referendum. And of course, as a Senate, what we feel is that we need a strong Senate, just like other jurisdictions. If you look at the US, Australia, you look at the UK, the Senate is considered an upper house, and it's a house that Of course, in Kenya, there was that joke of nyumba ya wazee, and it's true that it has very experienced people. So we need a strong Senate that will guarantee that devolution is not destroyed. Because I've had people talking about saying, we need to even do away with the Senate. And that takes me back, those of us who have been around. If you look at Kenya in 1963, we had a Senate, right, which was scrapped in 1966. We had Majimbo at that time, and when they scrapped the Senate, Majimbo went. So if we want to defend devolution, right, then you must have a strong house that is going to take care of the interests of of devolution and the counties, right, and that's already given in Article 96 of the Constitution of Kenya. Right. So what we are saying is that we in fact need a stronger Senate to be able to do that, to defend the counties. So if that conversation comes, and with the referendum, the calls for a referendum or relooking at the Constitution, yes, that will be the position of the Senate, that we need to be stronger to be able to perform our work, just like the Bomas draft had envisaged, but it was changed, right, when it went to Naivasha.
So Kenyans have been hearing a lot of such proposals, yes, by various political figures, and in the last 1 week or so, the Deputy President, William Ruto, was in the United Kingdom, where he had a talk at Chatham House, where he gave some proposals of what he would like changed about the Constitution, and one of the things he said was that the Senate should be made an upper house. Are you in agreement with the Deputy President's
Totally.
proposals?
We are in agreement. In fact, as we speak, the Senate had already come up with a document which they are formally also going to present it to the Building Bridges initiative, so that they have that particular document. And in that document, it is so detailed in terms of what we feel the Senate should be. And we are not reinventing the wheel. This is the practice all over the world. If you look, like I mentioned earlier on, if you look at other jurisdictions that have a bicameral system, right, Senate is normally the upper house, and then we have the National Assembly as the lower house, so that when issues come from the National Assembly, then they go to the Senate, they are elevated to the Senate. At the Senate, you'll be able to now look at it in a more focused manner. For example, if you're talking about vetting of state officers, that happens. In fact, in some countries, I think Rwanda is one of them, in some countries, a retiring president becomes an automatic member of the Senate. Right. And even in some countries, a retiring, say, Archbishop of say, the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church becomes a member of the Senate. So if you have that wealth of, if you have people, that wealth of experience, even currently as the Senate is constituted, if you look at senators like Mohamed Yusuf Haji, Amos Wako, the longest-serving Attorney General in Africa, you look at people like Moses Wetangula, Senior Counsel James Orengo, Mogeni, it has a wealth, people like Jerry Ndwiga, who was a minister for cooperative. Right. Those are people with a lot of experience, and if they are going to vet, for example, officers who are going to be appointed or officers proposed by the executive, honestly, or talking, just being blunt, you realize that is a team that can give a country the necessary human resource or human capital that we require.
Kenyans have witnessed several bouts of supremacy battles between the two houses of parliament, with the National Assembly appearing very defensive about their place in the Kenyan Constitution, even calling the Senate names, nyumba ya wazee. Will they accept for the Senate to be made an upper house?
That's going to, if Kenyans decide who will refuse, because these are Kenyans who are going to make that decision once, say, a referendum question is determined and Kenyans are asked on what they feel. And we will not be reinventing, like I said, you are not inventing the wheel. Right. You're just doing what a practice that is all over the world. That is exactly what happens. But if you have noticed, since the 12th Parliament, we have not had a lot of acrimony between the National Assembly and the Senate. We have worked with my colleague, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Justin Muturi, very, very well. If there are issues, I walk across, because after all, we are in the same building. Right. I just walk to his office, or he comes to my office, and we sort it out. But the normal tensions that come are not new. They are not only unique in Kenya. Right. We have visited other countries like the United States, like the UK, and you realize that there's always that tension between the two houses. That is normal, but we try to manage it so that we don't derail our main objective of, offering legislation, oversight, and representation. So long as we keep to the narrow path, I'm sure that we can be able to manage any rivalries that come about.
Now, in this talk, one of the proposals that has been brought to the fore, one by ODM leader Raila Odinga, has been, he did mention it during the devolution conference last year, was that to add another tier of government that is above the devolved units as we know them today. Many think that would spell the end of the counties that Kenyans have enjoyed since the rebirth, the promulgation of the new constitution. What is your take on that?
Yeah, that will
Taking
be tricky.
away the counties.
Yeah, that will be tricky. Trying to claw back what people are used to can become very tricky, because already, even I'm talking now as a Kenyan, there are areas where people still even want their own counties because they feel they are still marginalized, And when you find that when it comes to sharing of resources or people feeling that they are not being well represented, they want their own county, that could be a very tricky affair, because people are already used to the counties the way they are, people are used to the wards the way they are, the constituencies the way they are. So when you say you maybe want to reduce them, that would be tricky. But again, it's not for me to make that judgment, but the Kenyans themselves, because we are talking about, if you look at the constitution, it says we the people of Kenya.
Yes.
So the power belongs to the people. If they make that decision, then that will be the decision of the Kenyans. But
as somebody who has served as governor, and now you're the leader of the House of Parliament that is supposed to look out for devolution, what would be the best formula?
The best formula would be, first, in my own view, we can still retain what we have, the counties the way they are, because people are used to them. Right. But there are lessons that we have learned, having been one of those who was a governor and now in the Senate, that we need to build the capacities of the county assemblies, because the way they are, because the first point of call for oversight are the county assemblies. Right. Most county assemblies lack the capacity to do that, and I've proposed that immediately members of the county assemblies are elected, they should be taken to a place like Kenya School of Government, so that they are given some sort of training in governance, in finance, because they come from diverse backgrounds. Some have been farmers, some have been business people, so they need that. Because if somebody has just come, he was a farmer, and you make him the chair of business of budget, for example, you have not given him the tools to perform that duty. So you need to build a capacity. Another aspect that is very important, and having come from that field, is to have financial autonomy of the county assembly, so that they are able to do oversight. Right. The way it is now, they rely on governors. If, for example, a governor decides to take all the MCS on a trip to Mombasa, for example, from Nyandarua, and he's footing the bill, he's giving them the allowances, there's no way they can be objective in their oversight. So the county assemblies need to have some financial autonomy where they can be able to operate independently and offer oversight. So when they do the oversight, because they are on the ground, even the work of the Senate will be much easier when the reports come. And we're also saying that, Senate, because some people have been saying maybe there's some duplication. Right. We are now happy that Senate is not going to act like morticians who are looking at, postmortems, because the reports are filed. It takes so long to bring the audited reports to the Senate. So you are looking at something, for example, 2014, 2015 financial year. So, but now we are looking forward to having some oversight money given to the senators, so that they can be able to visit the counties, to look at the issues that are happening there, so that they are able to address issues on the spot. If there's misappropriation going on, they can be able to tackle it there without necessarily waiting for the auditor's report to come maybe after 3 years. Right. So that will not be helpful, and I'm happy that this is beginning to happen, because the Senate, I think there's some funds that are now going to be available for them to carry out their oversight functions.
All right, as we move away from this referendum talk, under your watch, what will be the place of the Senate in this review process?
As we have said, the Senate is a key institution in terms of oversighting the counties, in terms of representation, and in terms of this oversight, representation, and there's a third one. But those two are very, very important. Right. So the place of the Senate, we want to be a proactive Senate, a Senate that is going to defend devolution, that we are not going to come up with legislation. In fact, the third one is legislation. We are not going to come up with legislation that is going to claw back the gains that we have already gotten as a country.
Right.
So that we come up with legislation that is going to ring fence or defend devolution and counties, because a lot has really happened. If you go to the countryside, there are areas that had never seen, for example, Caesarean operation like Mandera. The first Caesarean operation was carried out in Mandera after devolution came into play. There are areas that people had never seen tarmac. In fact, if the students were asked the color of tarmac, they would maybe say it's blue. But now, at least they are beginning to experience that. That is what we would want to experience. That is why we would want a strong Senate to be able to advocate for that, to be able to fight for more funds to go to the counties so that people can enjoy the fruits of devolution which they voted for in the Constitution.
Let's talk about some politics for a few minutes now. How has leading the Senate been post-March 2018 when the handshake happened? Did anything change?
Yes, of course. You remember when immediately after the elections, members of the opposition, NASA, boycotted sittings in the assembly, and therefore it was very difficult to transact in a business. It was difficult to constitute committees. But after the handshake, I think the tensions that were witnessed in the country came down. And that was also reflected in the House because, again, the members of NASA came to the House, the committees were formed, and even if they disagree in an honorable manner. Unlike, before the handshake, there was a lot of acrimony. You would even think these were senators from two different countries. So the handshake, I think, was necessary at that particular time, and that's why we've always thanked His Excellency the President and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga for taking that bold step to save the country from the polarization that was being witnessed. So it is something that even made my work easier as a speaker, because now you can be able to preside over a house of sobriety where people are looking at issues from one perspective and arguing for the welfare of the country.
All right. So what the political leaders are saying is that there's more inclusivity right now. And just going back to the clamor for a referendum to change the constitution, some of the proposals that have been made across to try and solve this problem has been, to have a prime minister, another position to make sure there's no winner take all. There's also a position that we need a leader of official opposition. Which, from where you sit, which is more effective, a leader of official opposition in parliament or a prime minister?
From where I sit, now talking as a Kenyan,
yes.
I think that when you have a strong opposition, it acts as a check to the government. And I think that would be a very good position. Again, like I say, the Kenyans are the ones who will be able to decide that. But from my own experience, that when you have a strong opposition, it will keep the government of the day in check, make sure certain things that are not being done properly will be raised on the floor of the House, they will be discussed, and the government will be aware that if it doesn't do what is required, then there will be there is a strong opposition that will keep questioning everything that they will do. They will act with a bit of, they will be careful the way they execute their programs. They will be careful the way they are doing their things. So I think if we have and we have had that position before, remember, we've had an official position, and most of the leaders, even the current president, I remember at one time, was the official leader of opposition.
Yes.
So once there's also a position that is established, then I think that can help in putting the government of the day on its toes and making sure it performs well. And
currently, even as you resume for the third session, there seems to be more changes, politically speaking, especially in the majority Jubilee Party, where we have seen some 2022, cracks start appearing, some faction seemingly fighting the deputy president's ambitions for status in 2022. Is this going to be a problem for you in the Senate?
No, I think in the House we'll focus on the business of the day. What happens out there, I hope it doesn't creep into the House, because that's why I said the House that I lead, talking about the House that I lead, like I said, is a house of sobriety. We have very mature people, and I don't expect that what happens in funerals or what people talk in weddings and all that will find their way on the floor of the House. That will be unfortunate. But we try as much as possible to keep to the rules, because Parliament is a house of rules and procedures and precedents. So we'll try to keep as sober as possible, because Kenyans are watching, and we are happy that these days it's broadcast live, so Kenyans will be able to see whether, as a house, we are performing as to the expectations, or we are just focusing on side shows and not focusing on things that really affect Mwananchi. And I'm aware that senators are aware of that, and when it comes to 2022, they will be judged by what they have delivered, what we have delivered as a house.
All right. There's also the other side of the minority coalition, that is NASA, which you said they were problematic in the first, immediately after the election, but after the handshake, things have been a bit more peaceful. But we are getting chatter of some rumors of a plan to oust you. Are you aware of such? Are you worried at all?
I've not heard about that. We have had a very good working relationship with the senators. I don't think that I have made any ruling that has been unfair to any side. We have had a very good working relationship, and therefore I'm not aware of any such plans. But if they come, we'll deal with them, because there's also a procedure of how that is done in the House. But I've not heard of it. But what I know is that we have worked very well. Right. We have just started, and we are prepared to prosecute what is before the House. And we are hoping that we'll have a peaceful time, so that we are able to go the full calendar, and at the end of the 5 years, that Kenyans can be able to judge the Senate based on what they have delivered and what they have done.
As a Speaker, you're supposed to be impartial. How do you deal with any such things if there could be some political plans to try and undercut you? How do you deal with that?
Like I said, when I get to the House, of course it's a fact that I was brought in by the Jubilee Party, but the moment I became the Speaker, I'm impartial. I'm guided by the Constitution and the standing orders. Any ruling that I made must be informed by those two, the Constitution and the standing orders of the House. The moment you go out of that, then you run into trouble. And that's why I don't entertain. And if you talk to senators, they will tell you, I have not shown any preference for any side of the House. Right. I have followed the law. I have made rulings based on the Constitution and the standing orders as is stated in the law.
Away from politics, how much of an impact do you think your work in the Senate, plus that of your counterpart in the National Assembly, Justin Muturi, will have on the President's legacy in the next 3 years in terms of the Big Four agenda?
Yeah, if you notice the Big Four agenda, most of them, in fact, almost all of them are devolved functions. We have the universal health care, we have food security, we have manufacturing, and which is the other fourth one, I'll remember. But these are devolved functions. Housing. So we are also coming up with legislation that strengthens that focuses on the agenda, so that we support the President's agenda. For example, the food security bill, which has already come to the floor of the House. We have other, even what we are talking about, the land value index laws, which I said was on the second reading today. Right. So we have legislation that have come that also support the President's agenda of the Big Four agenda, and even the universal health care. We're also coming up with legislation that supports that, because we must then again support the agenda of the President. And as a House, as Senate, that is what we are also focusing on. So all we are saying is that we are also having legislation that is going to support that.
All right. Talk to us about your entry. There's the upcoming census in August, which has been a bit of an emotive issue. There's a statistics bill which is due for publication, I believe. What should Kenyans expect from Parliament in terms of this, how the census is dealt with?
Of course, this year's census is going to be different. What is going to be unique about it is the biometric. This time it's going to be biometric. We're going to use the biometric system, and that was passed in the National Assembly and in the Senate, where we'll be able then to know the details of everybody using a biometric system. So it's not going to be very easy to cheat, because remember the last census there were allegations that there were people who areas where numbers were inflated, and therefore that did not reflect well, because we must have a credible census,
right.
Because census is what guides planning. Census is what guides even politics, because if you are going to vote, then people need to know that this region will have this number of people. Even the money that goes to the counties, for example, is of great concern to the Senate, because we are the ones that part of our mandate is the division of revenue that
yes.
goes to the counties. That again is also based to a very large extent on population. So if we have an accurate census, that is also going to inform how much money goes to the counties and goes to which county. So it's a very, very important national event, and we as Senate have also gone out to sensitize our people on the importance of participating in the national census, because already propaganda was coming up in some areas that if you go, if they use your fingers, they use biometric. If you are a criminal, then you'll be arrested on the spot. So such things always come up when we have such national events, but we are hoping that people will sensitize them so that they participate fully.
All right. Is the IEBC, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, going to be high in your agenda as Parliament this session, in terms of Kenyans have been asking, will it be restructured? Will we get it fully constituted? It is 3 years to the election. Yeah. The self-audit that has happened, is it the right thing to do? Is it a priority?
Yeah, it's a priority, because, IBC, that's the body that deals with elections. And if you don't get it right at that level, then, you can be sure you can have a very good, you can prepare. You can have all the preparations, but if it's the IBC does not rise to the occasion, then the whole thing could be bungled. So I think that is something that will definitely be given priority, and we need to prepare early. We need to have it fully constituted early enough, so that they also prepare. Because remember, in the 2017 election, some of the issues, the timelines were so close,
yes,
that we were almost being caught up. With the timeline. So I think IBC needs to be constituted early enough. They need to prepare early enough so that they have enough time and room to be able to maneuver should something not be working. But when you work with very tight timelines, it becomes very, very problematic.
As you wind up, Mr. Speaker, what is your vision for devolution in this country? And as you answer that, you in the past you've advised counties not to entirely rely on the money that comes from the national government. Yeah. Do you think that there is need to rethink how allocation of funds is done?
Yes. I think my advice has been, and also having been one of the governors, that the counties must start to think outside the box. In fact, they should remove the box, right, so that they look at the local, how they generate revenue, locally generated revenue. Because this over-reliance on national government treasury funds coming, I think is not working very well for the counties. So counties must have an innovative way of raising funds.
Right.
They must be able to deal with pilferage. They must be able to deal with theft of money that is being collected, so that the locally generated revenue. And the CRA, I want to laud CRA because they have also come up with a formula where counties that raise more money are going to be given more. So if you raise more as an incentive, you are going to be given more. So I think counties must begin to think outside the box on how they generate more revenues themselves. And of course, my vision for devolution is that we are making good strides. We are going to have the devolution conference in Kirinyaga next month, just to look at what we have achieved. And I'm happy that now the devolution family is reading from the same script. Remember, the first phase was more of a learning curve where we had the devolution family fighting amongst itself. Everybody was trying to find their space. MCAs were busy impeaching governors. Governors were busy, with protocol, His Excellency. Senators were busy summoning governors to come, people are finding a space. But I think we don't have that luxury now. Okay. We must be able now to perform and make sure that devolution works. But I'm very optimistic. I'm very positive that from what I'm seeing, devolution is working, and we all Kenyans must be prepared to make it work, whether it's the executive, the legislature, or the judiciary. And I'm sure if we all work in harmony, devolution is going to take this country to the next level.
We will bring you back to the studio to talk to Kenyans. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Ken Lusaka, Speaker of the Senate, talking to us about just some of the things that the Kenyans should expect from the third session of the 12th Parliament from the Senate. A lot on that in trend, of course. A lot will be happening politically with calls to change the constitution and all that. Thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk to you. So we leave it on KTN Prime this Thursday night for me. I am Ben Kitili. Good night from